everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to Miraculous Thinking. I'm your host, Elenique Marie. With me, the one, the only, Crystal Ann Compton. And I'm excited, Crystal. I'm excited because we're starting our surrender experiment.
I know. And I'm really excited about this book because it's got a different mouthfeel than the other books that we have done. We are starting this book with just part one. So that is what you and I read. We just read part one, which is like about 50 pages worth of content for me. So that was quite a good chunk of this author's background. And wow, what an interesting story that we're going to be getting into today, and so many really juicy tidbits. And right after I reviewed it again today, I hopped on my podcast and I interviewed somebody who proceeded to talk about personal experiences that like almost perfectly aligned what I had just read in this book. Yeah, super synchronistic, just about the observer and all the things that we're going to be getting into. But I'm really enjoying it, so I'm excited.
I mean, I read this years ago, but rereading it, I was like, wow, I forgot that that's how it happened, for him. And just marveling at how the most mundane things can transform your life if you're ready.
And if you're noticing,
Yes.
yeah, like if you're actually, like if you have the capacity to notice and to feel, which, like if he hadn't been paying attention, like his awakening would not have really happened, right?
No.
So we'll get into all of that,
Oh,
but why don't we organize this for everyone? And I apologize, by the way, we did not have a podcast last week because maybe you can tell I'm a little congested. Last week, I was just not feeling it at all. Could not bring myself to record. So I'm sorry that we missed a week, but we are going to be going forward with the surrender experiment for the rest of January. And it sounds like through February as well will help us to complete this book. Let's go ahead and give the organization how we are going to be reading and discussing the surrender experiment by Michael Singer. Today, we're going to be going over part one, as discussed. Next week, we're going to be going over part two. The week after that, we're going to be covering parts 3 and 4. The week after that, parts 5 and 6. Week after that, parts 7 and 8. And then finally ending with part or section 9. And these are all sectioned out, by the way, in the table of contents. So we aren't making these sections. These are right here for you to go ahead and get into yourself. And again, that'll take us through February of 2023. And then we're going to be moving on to our next book. And so why don't we announce what that book's going to be? You want to?
We are going to be doing Inside the Body of God by Karen Curry Parker, my mentor. And I cannot wait to talk about that. Well, my mentor and co-author, she's also co-authoring the book. Ooh, the book comes out January 22nd, which is the new year for human design. Human design does not follow the regular calendar, but it's on the 22nd of January that we have the new year.
That's coming right up. That's
5 days.
5 days. Oh my gosh. Are you so excited?
I'm so excited. I'm so excited, and I just can't believe it. I really can't believe it. It's just one of those things you can't believe until it actually happens,
Well, next week, by the time we record next week, it will be out. So we'll include a link so that everybody can get out and buy it. Or is there like a pre-order link, or like, is there anything?
There is. You can check it out. I'm actually going to make a post about it today on my Instagram.
Okay.
At Elenique Marie Coaching, and we can probably put it here in the video.
Yeah,
There's like a
if you give me the
pre-ordering.
link. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
We can get you to pre-order that, and that'll bust it up that Amazon
ranking.
list. That's right. Okay, so
the Inside the Body of God by Karen Curry Parker, and then we will follow that with Illusions by Richard Bach. And then we will follow that up with The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. Beautiful book. And thank you, Martha Beck, for understanding that some of us need large print.
Some of us really like it.
Yes.
I really like the large print.
Thank you so much. That's an integrity with me.
Large print. I'm excited. So I just ordered The Way of Integrity. I've had Illusions for many years. I want to say since like 2005. I've never read it. My brother got me this book, when I was totally into my psychic, intuitive life and all of the things that were going on with that. He gave me this book and he said, I really think that you're going to like it. My brother's an evangelical Christian and he thought this was a bit mystical, but right
Oh,
up my alley. But he thought it was super, super poignant. So I thought maybe we could read it together and
yes. Let's
dig
do
into
it.
it. I'm excited. So
I
this
love
one's for
it.
you, Jesse. So
Yay.
those are the next three books. I'm going to go ahead and put those books and the order in the description of this podcast or this video, as well as the organization that we're going to be moving through for the surrender experiment. So if you want to follow along, you know what to read and when, so you can join the conversation. And to that end, if you ever want to submit a comment or a question to either Elenique or myself or the both of us, you can always do that right there on our YouTube by just dropping a comment there under a video and or writing us directly at miraculousthinking@gmail.com. Miraculous Thinking is one word at gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram and send us a DM there. Miraculous Thinking on Instagram. Links in the description.
Description.
All right,
Perfect.
Elenique, let's get into the surrender experiment. Now, when we were doing the Kabbalion, which obviously I'm
Hmm.
very scarred by, um,
Yes.
I was taking notes. It was like it was a dissertation for my
Hmm.
doctorate. It was a whole
Hmm.
thing I was doing with that book. This one,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
didn't really do that. I thought I would just surrender into it
Yes, I like the play on words
and
there.
enjoy it.
I did something similar, to be honest. I started taking notes. I had my note like thing open on my computer and I started putting some stuff. And then as I went into it, I was like, you know what? No, let me just see what remains here as we just organically have this conversation about his process and what it brought up. So I had a question. Do you so this is a story about a man's spiritual awakening,
Mhm.
essentially. And he describes how it happened very innocently, almost like without having any intentionality. Just have you ever had something like that happen to you?
I mean, yes, like having a mundane type of
Yes.
normal experience and all of a sudden having the eyes to see it in a different way or to see the meaning beneath it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
Mm-hmm.
has happened. I think the more you develop spiritually, the more you train your eyes to see in that way. So you
Mm-hmm.
notice some of these things. But when it first starts happening and you start having these little kind of explosive awakenings or awarenesses, it can really kind of set you back on your heels. And
Mm-hmm.
this book opens with just such an awakening. He's, I think, hanging out with his brother in law at the time, and they're having some conversation about this or that. And all of a sudden, spontaneously, he notices that he's thinking in his head. He notices the voice that is thinking. And so, as his brother in law is speaking about whatever it is they're talking about, he's noticing his voice in his head ready to answer. This is what I'm going to say. Then I'm going to ask this question. And him noticing his own inner thinking, which would be the ego mind, I think we could say,
Mm-hmm.
wakes him up to the reality that he is someone other than that voice in his head. Previously, up until this moment, he's always identified himself as the thinker, that voice that's always on a loop in the head. And now all of a sudden, he gets this clarity that, whoa, I'm a being that stands behind or above or around this voice that is thinking in my head, leading him to the understanding that he's somebody else. And the
Yes.
question, well, who am I? And the
Mm-hmm.
follow up question, which is, how can I get this voice to shut up? It's always
Yes.
talking.
Yes. Yes. And the part that I liked was when he says that as he was sitting there on the couch with his brother-in-law, he noticed that he was so uncomfortable in the silence.
Mm,
That's why he was grasping for things to say. And how many of us don't feel that feeling, when you're around people and you run out of something to say and you're like, okay, am I boring this person? I got to find something else to connect with here. This anxiety around silence, especially in this world that we live in that's so noisy
mm,
and full of distraction. And I think that we do run, most of us run, like just sort of like a defense mechanism. inbuilt, like run from the silence, because if you were to sit in the silence long enough, you would notice the voice. And then you would realize just how crazy it actually is.
Mhm.
And that he started talking about, and I was like, yes. I mean, I remember when I started paying attention to the voice in my head, actually questioning it, not assuming that it was me, but that I was like, wow, this this is really negative or critical, especially of me, right? So the voice was like, don't eat that. Oh my God, that's sloppy. Like, and it wasn't until many years later that I realized, wow, that's not me. That's the conditioning,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah. And, I've done this work. I call this a position of the higher vantage point, the observer observing with neutrality, without judgment, the chatter of the ego mind, which is being animated by, I believe, our inner stuff, our programs, our beliefs. It's also mind dump stuff. This is the stuff that we've been dealing with during the day. It's now showing up in the form of chatter. So I've developed the facility to pop out and just check it out with neutrality. But my voice is always narrating. And he talks about this too. He's like, you
Mhm.
don't have to tell me that I'm seeing that. I am the being that's seeing that. This
I'm
is
seeing
redundant.
it.
But my
Yes.
voice is always narrating, or also wondering how something I'm experiencing would be perceived by somebody else who knew I was perceiving it.
Mhm,
I'm just like,
mhm,
why would I
mhm.
care how somebody else is experiencing my personal experience? I'm not performing on the world stage.
Right.
Like, just trying to get the nature of this ego monkey mind,
Mm.
and also trying to not take it too seriously, right? Because I think
Yes.
when you identify with the thinking mind or the chatter, you are identifying with the wrong self for sure.
Yeah, that's the other thing. If you push back too hard, you're making it just as real as if you're
Hmm.
listening to it. So any extreme response other than just neutrality and just observing that it's there and then observing when it's quiet is attachment to it as real,
Oh,
right?
that's
Like
a
how we
good
say,
point.
you know what I mean? Like we tend to think, I was talking to someone this week about that, how we we're not okay with not being okay. Nobody wants to be sad. Nobody wants to be mad. Nobody wants to. But what I realize now, and especially thank God for human design, that most of us are on a wave, an emotional wave. It depends on the planets, it depends on what's happening in your life, on your biology. But it is completely normal, natural, and healthy to have low parts to your wave. That's when you're kind of pulling in. Maybe it's an uncomfortableness that's creating the opportunity for change or shift or perspective. But we don't want that. We want to hold on to the identity of we're happy, we're productive, we're doing great. And then that other part is not me. And
Right.
by fighting that as not me, we actually reinforce it like we learned in the law of attraction. What you focus on,
Hmm.
you grow, right?
Right.
That you're just making more of it for yourself. So this way that he speaks of, just let it go. Just like watch it and don't judge it.
Well, I mean, it took him a little while to get there because
Oh yeah.
he became very bothered by this voice, and he kind of sets off on a quest to figure out how to shut it up. And he's talking to his peers and his professors, and they're looking at him like he's crazy. Like, did you know that there's a voice in your head that's talking all the
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
People could take that a little funny. And finally, one of his friends gives him a book. I think it was called, actually, is it The Three Pillars of Zen or something like that?
Yes.
I,
The,
I
the three pillars of Zen was the first one.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, and this is a book that teaches Michael Singer how to meditate in the Zen Buddhist tradition,
Hmm.
which he then sets out to do and has an amazing series of amazing experiences, but really connects in doing this meditation with this warm sense. He places it just below the belly, this warm sense of peace and quietude and a space and a place like nothing he has ever experienced. And it's also a place away from that constantly narrating ego monkey mind. And he talks about taking a weekend trip with his then wife and some friends. And he's like, it's such a beautiful place. Can I go to the lake and just hang out for a little bit by myself. And they're like, yeah, sure, go. And he goes and he sits by the lake in lotus position and he does this Zen Buddhist meditation and he's there for hours and he's kind of noticing the field, the magnetic field around him that is expanding because of this particular meditation he's doing. He's noticing the quality of the silence, the sound of silence. There's actually a sound. The interviewer, the guest that I was interviewing today actually called it thunderous silence, this just
Mm.
big phenomenon of silence. And he hung out there for just hours and would come up and then he'd go back down and come up and then he'd go back down. And thus starts his journey, I think, on this path to finding more of that, just wanting to always be immersed in the energy of that.
Absolutely. And what an addictive thing, right? That
Mhm.
deep stillness and peace and sort of tranquility from that voice that never is never quiet. And realizing kind of like I think about it like, sometimes you're in a room, back in the old days when they used to have those window units of air conditioners, the ones that would go in the window,
Mhm.
and they would make all this noise. I didn't notice that sound until I traveled to Europe for the first time, and there was no air conditioning because there was no need. And I'm sleeping in this bed and I'm losing my mind
Right.
because
So
it was
quiet.
too quiet.
Right.
I was like, "Where's the humming?" So it wasn't until I was away from the humming that I even realized there was humming. And it's like that with that voice in our heads. It's there all the time, so you don't notice it. It's only when you get these little respites, depending on how, some mostly by grace, that we're graced with these opportunities, or when something disrupts your life tremendously. And that's another thing that he talks about which we'll later learn, that this whole new way of being eventually causes him his marriage. And
Mhm.
his wife is just like, dude, I don't know what you're doing, but this doesn't work for me because we came camping, and you're gone for like a day meditating by yourself.
Right.
So disruptions are, like we talk so much, these invitations to shed that old way of being and step into some new version of us. So I found that very, very poignant, that it was the broken heart that really
Mhm.
accelerated his process into getting to know himself. And I can
Yes.
relate to that.
Yes. And at some point, he talks about a synchronicity where the idea of Mexico starts showing up in his experience. Somebody mentions, hey, Mexico is an awesome place to
Mhm.
go and hang out. He goes to a gas station. There is a map of Mexico on the pump that he's using. There's a couple more instances where Mexico comes up. And by this point, due to the meditative practice and his kind of new awareness and understanding, he understands, oh, I should probably see what it's like to just go with the flow. And so
Mhm.
he goes to Mexico. And I think he ends up in northern Mexico. And he's like, well,
Yes.
there's no woods here, which he likes to park in the woods and meditate. And he's like,
Mhm.
there's no woods here. So let me just pull off the street. And he drives off of the road across this clearing and he ends up on a vista overlooking like everything. And it's a beautiful, beautiful panoramic view. So he parks his van there and he spends weeks just hanging out in his van, practicing, doing his meditation, doing his rituals. This is really, really what is sustaining him. And he feels this deep, deep peace. And then he talks about an experience while in Mexico. He's set out, he's doing his yoga, he's away from his van, um, and he hears horses and he hears whispers. He can tell people are approaching, but he doesn't stop his yoga practice. The yoga practice always ends with like a 30-minute meditation. And so even though he knows there are people probably very nearby watching him, he goes from the yoga into the meditation for 30 minutes, closes his eyes. He doesn't respond. He makes a choice not to respond in fear. Because
Mhm.
before going to Mexico, everybody said, oh, be careful of the banditos, be careful, you don't want to talk to anybody, and tried to inject him or contaminate him with all this anxiety. And so in this moment, as he's meditating and he knows there's a couple of people on horses watching him, he makes a choice not to give in to the fear, but just to conclude his practice and then turn around and talk to these two guys on horseback. And what ends up happening is amazing because he didn't let that monkey mind dictate who they were, what could be happening, and instead just allowed himself to be present, he discovers two beautiful people who end up giving him a horseback ride back to his van and inviting him to their neighborhood or their village, which
Yeah.
is really, really very simple, like mud houses. And he goes there and he spends time with them. He gives them food, they share. I mean, it's just such a beautiful experience that he never would have had if he hadn't made the decision to just surrender and go with the flow with what was showing up in his life that day.
Yes. And I thought it was very interesting also the surrendering into fear as opposed to resisting it, which we've talked about in the past. But I think that the hardest and scariest part of surrender is the fear that if we surrender, something bad will happen to us. And we never think if we surrender, something great can happen to us. And he, when he talks about the beginning, that we think that we're responsible for creating our life and that we think that our will is what creates our reality. But there are forces that have been around for 13.8 billion years that are making this present moment, because that particle collided with that particle and all of this that has been happening. And so, what would happen? And those forces are what is holding the universe together, what creates worlds, what created us. So, there is an intelligence and sustainability in
Mhm.
that beautiful intelligence that moves and creates universes. So, why do we think that we have to create independent or in opposition to that force? And usually it's fear, right? Fear
Mhm.
of letting go. But I love that he points out, look what beautiful things happened because I didn't resist the fear. Allowed it to be. And I just kept doing what I was doing. And then I was rewarded with the trust.
Right.
So that to me was, I love that idea because it's about being a child again, right? It's about that innocence that we've lost by being hurt, by learning from our family and society. Be careful. And I understand, because if we don't, we might not live. Right, there is a part that the human being has to have for self-preservation, and yet when that is driving the bus, like we talk about, that's when we get into trouble
Right.
you know
Yes, and I love the idea, which I believe is a reality, of an infinite higher intelligence, this fabric of reality that to some degree has been predestined. And there are also parts of it open to chance and timeline adjustment, but like this, it's a fluid, alive
Mhm.
fabric that we're a part of. But that there is this infinite intelligence that absolutely knows what is best for us and knows the best experience for us, the best people to meet, the best things to do, the best way to eat in your life, which he
Mhm.
ultimately talks a little bit about that. And that we can trust this. And it's really about learning methods, techniques, ways to trust this infinite intelligence and to not lean on our own understanding. And it's not that our understanding is bad. It's not. It's not that our reasoning is flawed. It's not necessarily. It's that there's this infinite intelligence that has this higher vantage point of the life. And we can really trust that. And it can be scary to just let go.
Mm.
Like it's like Jesus in Gethsemane. I know I'm always talking about Jesus in Gethsemane, but like he was afraid, the night before his crucifixion, he's afraid. He wants friends, he's lonely, he's feeling so much, but he surrenders to what is for the highest good of all when he says thy will be done. And in doing so, we have this archetypal redemption and salvation for humanity. If he had forced his will and absconded by night to go to Egypt
Yeah.
or India or anywhere else, like what miracle would we have been denied because of it? So this
Mhm.
willingness to surrender is so important. And so I just found his time in Mexico, as he described it, to be so enchanting, and how you can do so much, experience so much with so little physically.
Yes. Yes. And that part where he talks about the signs that he was given at the gas station, among others, which later in the book is full of, following those signs, reminded me so much of what we talked about for your type, for generators and human design, and how you're built to respond. and how and I wanted to do his chart. I have to figure out his birth time, but he had a desire, and that desire sent out a signal to the universe. And in response to that desire, the invitations or the things to respond to came Mexico. And so now he's like, okay, Mexico. And there he goes. And so this idea that we have to create the opportunities is illusion. We don't have to create anything. We just have to get very connected to what is it that we truly desire and put it out there, hold it in our heart. And then the world, depending on our type, will give it to us. And then all we have to do is respond or, accept the invitation in the case of projectors. You know, only the manifestors will probably feel the call and act on it with not having to wait for much. But I thought, wow, I think it's pretty beautiful how these things layer in,
Mhm.
how we just studied that. And now here we are seeing a real life example of someone who knows nothing about it, but somehow discovered his strategy
Right.
and just went with it.
Yes. So the next little section that I thought was so wonderful is he ultimately leaves Mexico. He goes back to Gainesville. And I think he's in a doctoral program for
Hmm.
economics, and he's fastly like losing interest in all of that. He's like, I just want to be in lotus position in my van. That's all he wants to do. But I think out of a sense of obligation for one of his professors, he goes to class from time to time. And in I guess his economics class, he asks his professor to allow him to write a paper and to grade him based on that paper and his exams. And the professor says, "I'll think about it." Because he hasn't been showing up, and the professor's like, you're not going to pass unless you actually
Yeah.
participate. And he's like, well, let me write this paper. Let me take the exams and grade me on that. And so he then describes going back to his van and sitting, I think it's at night, he's sitting at his little fold out table. And what unfolds to me feels like a channeling experience. He opens
Mm,
himself up. He's already like turbo connected because he's meditating
yes.
all the time. So he opens himself up, but in a way, and he was very careful to say without attachment to outcome, like not needing the paper to be like a certain length or be about a
Hmm.
certain thing necessarily, just opening up a space to get that done. And boom, like this dispensation of knowledge, like he had it all in an instance, which I would call claircognizance, just had all the information in an instance. All he had to do was write it out, and it just flowed from him so easily and effortlessly. He ends up turning in the paper and he gets an A. And that professor is like, I'd like you to do your dissertation under me. Like, I'm so impressed by this paper.
Hmm.
And he didn't even think about it. And he didn't even really care about the topic. He just put
Right.
himself in the flow of it, and boom, it showed up on the page.
Absolutely. And how beautiful is that? Like creativity and
Yeah.
inspiration, these things, they come not from pushing. In fact, the harder you push, the less inspired you become, and again, it's about surrender, isn't it? It's about thinking that you have access to higher information than what you could ever have just from a book or from your logical mind. And there is this dance happening between what he knows with his logical mind, and he's clearly an extremely intelligent person. He mentions in there that he had taken advanced calculus and, all
Hmm.
these classes. So it's a very intelligent man, but there's something beyond intelligence. It's that inspiration and that grace, and that when he opened with humility and was like, I need to write this paper and just let it flow, that connected with him and created the channel. And then the inspiration could come, and it became something beyond what he could have ever written
Hmm.
had he even been intending to. So
Yes.
it's about this allowing and the humility again, to be humble, that there is something that knows more than you.
Yes, and it goes to this idea, that St. Francis spoke of when he said, Lord, make me an instrument. It's all about being an instrument, really just being
Hmm.
a vessel, just being a body for the way spirit moves through you. And so it's so cool to me how he shares his experience going inward and encountering that silence, that peace that surpasses all understanding, turning off the monkey mind, and really making him immune to the wayward world and the way the
Mm,
world is so noisy, just immune to it, just got this safe space right inside of him. He's always wanting to return to it. But at the same time, when he opens himself up in this way to make himself a vessel, like what can pour through him in
right.
the creative process. And again, it sounds like a paper on economics. It's not something I necessarily want to read, but it doesn't matter. It's being the creator. Like when you are
Yeah.
connected to the creator of all things and you allow that energy to move through you, God will create through you in every
Mm,
single way, whether that's a
mhm.
paper, whether that's a healing, whether that's an inspiring word to someone who really needs to hear it. And so you can see how everything he's learning along the way is animating him in his life and helping him to
Yes.
succeed.
Absolutely. And, I was thinking about something related, not related directly, but so, I've always been into energy healing and Reiki and pranic healing and a million other things that I've been doing for a very long time. And the other night, I'm watching YouTube and I see this video. Of course, I'm watching Reiki videos. I'm always like, what new technique? What new? And this woman comes and does this evaluation. Sadhguru, the guy that wrote the
Mhm.
book Inner Engineering. So apparently, he made a video where he basically is against Reiki.
Mm,
He's against it. And he talks about how, you shouldn't go trying to fix something when you don't have the complete understanding of what's at work, and potentially that you could be picking up these karmas from other people because you're like enveloping yourself. So I was thinking about the story of Mickey and, flow, and what to me, what I always understood Reiki to be was being that vessel. Like when you channel something, it's not having ego. It's not saying, oh, I think the Reiki has to go to the left shoulder, or I'm going to make this stomach ache go away. And that's why I never called it healing. I always call it alignment, because you're just trying to align things as best as possible for your own intelligence to heal itself, right? So I'm wondering what you think about that. I actually had wanted to ask you, and now in light of this concept of just being a channel for inspiration, which involves healing, as Jesus did, right?
mhm, mhm,
He made people come back from the dead, right? Can you talk about a higher type of Reiki than,
mm-mm. No.
than the Reiki that literally brings people back from the dead? So, what is your? I don't know if you've heard about Sadhguru's complaining about, or not complaining, but his opinion on Reiki.
I have not. Um, on its face, I don't subscribe to that, because I feel and know myself as the consciousness in control of my own destiny, my own fields, my own systems. I'm in control of this. I'm the sovereign higher self being in control of this. And so I don't think when I make myself a vessel or an instrument for pure spirit that anything can go wrong, not for me as the vessel, not for the person that's receiving whatever is coming from spirit as a healing. That's not how spirit works. Um, yeah, you know me, I'm really not preoccupied with protection rituals, with making sure I'm not absorbing and picking up and what's happening in attachments and things of that nature, because
Mhm.
what I know to be true is that when I maintain a connection, a divine connection with source energy or my higher self, and I operate in that connection, which I call dominion, like nothing really can stick to me, nothing can attach to me, no lower negative entity or energy can be a part of that experience. These things just don't align. So my
Mhm.
first knee-jerk reaction without watching his video, which I should do, is to
Yeah.
say I don't believe that. I think
Yeah.
if the person who's doing the healing is in ego,
Right.
is in performance, has ulterior motives, then you open yourself up to potential problems. But if you're acting purely with a spiritual or a divine instinct, no, I do not think anything bad can happen to you. That's my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of, I totally think you hit the nail on the head regarding intention, and intention is everything, right? So if it, I think that a big problem that has happened with energy healing in the last decade, particularly, is that these used to be things that people had to study for years to really clear their own junk, you
Right.
know,
Right.
before you went trying to channel anything. Because if you yourself are um, obstructed, then you're having clean water going through a dirty filter. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so you don't know if you're doing good for the other person or whether you're just augmenting a bad situation and making it worse. So I think that I agree with him in the accountability. And I think that's what, like with Mickey, like if he hadn't been doing all that inner work, that genius couldn't have flown through the way it did. So it's just thinking about how we have to be accountable to ourselves for our own hygiene, our own
Mm.
emotional hygiene, our own energetic hygiene, and really when we engage with others to really have a check-in, right, with yourself. Like, where is my intention here, and where is this energy really coming from? Because you can create problems for others, and you can create problems for yourself if you're
Yes.
coming at it from ego.
Correct. Now, I do want to make one clarification. Well, first of all, Jesus said you don't put new wine into old wineskins, which is somewhat what you're speaking about
Yes.
here. But there is this idea as well that healers have to have their shit together or
Yeah.
have to be like physically whole in order to be an efficient healer or an effective
Hmm.
healer. And that's not what we're talking about, because the archetype or the trope of the wounded healer, I think, is more common than it is not, meaning many of the most powerful healers have huge trauma in their past, have huge wounding that they have been working through. And maybe they're not even done, maybe they're in process, but they're doing the work, they're leaning into their own refinement. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all your shit together. You can be in process and still be an amazing healer, but it is the intention. And it is the
Hmm.
process that you go through, priming, if you will, to make yourself that vessel that I think is important. That is what creates the new or the old
Yeah.
wineskin. It's not your physical body. It's not your ailments or your maladies. It's your heart. It's your energy. It's your spirit. It's your ability to be the vessel, which makes you a new or an old wineskin. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think for me, like what I realize is that a lot of people, like you said, it's not about being perfect, but it is about knowing what you're doing. And knowing what you're doing means awareness of energy. I mean, this is something you're training. Like you don't let a doctor year one go operate on someone's brain because that doesn't make him a brain surgeon. Just
Right.
because you went through introductory medical school or, season one. Can you tell I've been watching too much TV? It's like, whatever, semester one. Um, there is a process of maturation that is happening as you work with anything. And as you sit with it and give it time, it unfolds for you, especially when you keep approaching it without ego, or at least trying to manage your ego as best you
Mhm.
can. And so I think what has happened, you know how many Reiki masters I have met? It's like I could probably find, I don't know, a unicorn quicker. Like
Mhm.
there's so
Mhm.
many Reiki, everybody's a Reiki master. But I mean, it used to be that you had to study 10 years.
Mhm.
And not because they're trying to keep it exclusive, but because there really is a learning curve to working with energy and knowing yourself through working with energy, imperfect or not perfect, whatever, however it may be. But what I notice now is just another title. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you
Oh,
hit your little mic, but I can hear you now. Yeah.
okay. Sorry about
It's okay.
no, that, like there's so many careers like that now. Like, I mean, I the other day I saw a 19-year-old life coach.
Oh my gosh, I
And I'm
know.
like, well, don't you have to have had a life before you can coach about life? I
Well,
mean,
it's funny,
no offense to 19-year-olds,
I know. I
but
had this beautiful young woman on my podcast. I think she's 29 and she's a life coach and she's been, teaching about life for all these years. But, sitting listening to her, she was speaking in an ancient way, babe. She was speaking of like eternal truths and she had a language for this. And so you can be young and have access. I mean,
yes.
if you're the instrument, you've got access to it all. But I mean, it is I mean, you should make sure that you are doing your due diligence as somebody who's putting themselves out as a practitioner or a healer or an inspirer or a
Mhm.
guide. Do your due diligence to know the source material, know the source energy, and have a practice and a ritual, not unlike Michael Singer, where you're
Yes.
allowing the energy itself, the God energy, spirit energy, to refine the vessel. Because there's nothing that works better or faster than the spirit itself and
Mhm.
holding it within you. It will calibrate the vessel to where it needs to be in order to do the work. So if you're not meditating, if you're not praying, if you're not being contemplative, if you're not doing your practices, you are going to take a longer time to become the vessel that can do the most powerful work.
Absolutely. And that being said, like you said, there's a new breed of human
Hmm.
on the earth. These what are they called? Not purple children, but the
Indigo.
indigo purple children.
There's like
The
indigo children, there's crystal children,
crystal
there's rainbow
children.
children. Yeah.
And I believe it because I've talked to some kids that make me feel like I don't know anything. So I'm holding space for all of that subset of miraculous
Mhm.
beings, and I get it. But I'm talking about the fast culture,
Yeah.
like fast fashion, like fast
Hack culture.
everything.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
life hack,
like
mind hack. Right.
I know how to post 365 days on Instagram and quotes whose meaning I've never contemplated. And I'm just going to stick that out there and, I don't know, fill myself making a green smoothie. And now I'm prepared to take on, the universe. And
Clients.
so,
I'm
yeah.
taking
And
clients. Yep.
with deep trauma
Yeah.
and issues. And so I'm just saying, I just respect how Michael Singer talks in this book with so much reverence and discipline. And I think discipline is something that people just don't respect anymore. Not really,
Hmm.
because it used to be part of how we mastered something, not a discipline of a month, but a discipline of years, and really just surrendering into a discipline to reach a goal. And even though now there may be ways to get there quicker, and I get it, but I feel like we've lost something of that process of allowing things to germinate and really bloom into their maximum expression. I guess that's what I was,
Yes.
why I made
And
that connection.
Singer talks a little bit about like the depth of his practice. I think in the book, he says he's waking up at 3 a.m.
Hmm.
to do his Zen Buddhist meditation for a few hours, so at least 3 hours. And then in the morning, he takes a walk in his field, because we'll get there, but he takes a walk in his field. He does contemplative walking where he is hyper present with his footfall on the ground, the way his body is moving, the air as he's breathing it, like just practicing presence as he's walking. He talks about the way that he eats, and that the way to eat for him that fit these practices the most was ultimately like one salad every other day at
I
night.
know.
And I'm like, okay. But he did say
Yeah.
like the less food he had, the more attuned he felt.
Hmm.
And then he had another meditation at sunset, and he was like right on his pillow as soon as the sun's going down. He's so excited
Right.
to get back on the pillow, and he's spending another 3 hours or whatever, and then going to bed and waking up at 3 a.m. and doing that every single day. And so being
Hmm.
very disciplined with his routine, his practice,
Yes.
his ritual, his food, the way he's feeling, his noticing, his observation, and his feeling. And that will pay dividends.
Yeah. Well, no matter what it is that you do,
Yeah.
if you do it with that kind of devotion, I suppose is another way to think about it, is just to fully devote yourself to something without the consideration that it could be any other way. And
Yes.
I said to my husband, um, like love, right? Marriage, like a good marriage, like a great marriage. What does that look like? And I think it begins with the true understanding that you're going to discover yourself through that other person, no matter what. And really believing it and approaching every day in that way, as in, I will only look for the good in you. I will only look for the good. I will always give you the benefit of the doubt. I will always support you. And just constantly showing up every day from that place, as
Mhm.
opposed to today, I feel like giving it 50% and
Right.
tomorrow. But he doesn't do that, Michael Singer. And that's why he's transformed. And
Mhm.
there are many paths to this enlightenment, of which I believe relationships, for those of us that
Mhm.
do not take the contemplative, let me go live in a cave or meditate or live in an ashram, family and the family relationships can become that portal for those of us that continue to live lives in the world. And yet you have to do it with the same intense
The devotion.
dedication and devotion that you would take on anything else.
Yes. He actually refers to his life at this point as a monastic one. The
Mhm.
next section of this first part that we read, he is through serendipity led to, I guess, 10 acres of land. And it just so happens to be that he squirreled away the money his father gave him for his education. He was able to get fellowships. So he had about $15,000, and he made an offer on these 10 acres that were beautifully wooded, which he responded to, and which looked out over this just fantastic clearing, this beautiful piece of land. And he could see himself meditating there. That's all he wants to do is just find a place to meditate. That's all I want to do. So he makes an offer, and it's a lowball offer, but the person accepts it because, again, he's surrendering, he's going with the flow. And then he's got a couple of friends. One happens to be handy, the other one happens to be an architect or in school for that.
Mhm.
So the architect gets like this beautiful idea for a home that would be great for that property, draws up the plans. And these three men like pitch tents on the property and spend a few months out there just building this monastery. Really, it's a beautiful kind of little house for Michael Singer to live in, but it's going to be his personal monastery. And just the synchronicity that you see with him going to the lumber mill and meeting the owner, and the owner ends up loving these three boys, and inviting them to dinner and helping him when they can get the right piece of wood. And just the way it comes together is so magical for him. And then he ends
Mhm.
up with this beautiful piece of property, 10 acres, baby, with this beautiful kind of cool house, architecturally interesting. And now he's
Yes.
got his domain so he can meditate to his heart's content. And he does. And he thinks, when he ends the chapter on Get Thee to the Monastery, he ends it with, "Oh, I think I got it. This has got to be it. Here we
Right.
are." And he
Yep.
realizes no, because in the next and the last chapter of this part, it talks about the master appearing when the student is ready. Do you want to talk about what that is and how that happens for
Well,
him?
he finds one of my masters and one of my gurus, Paramahamsa Yogananda, and he someone introduces him to the autobiography of a yogi, and it's the first time that he understands that hunger, he gets a name for it, and it's God, because Paramahamsa Yogananda speaks of God like intoxication, like Rumi, this
Hmm.
just passionate love affair with God and all he wants. And when I remember when I started meditating, um, one of the lessons that I saw from him, he said, close your eyes, focus your attention on your third eye, put your tongue on the roof of your mouth, and just chant. Beloved Lord, reveal thyself to me. Reveal thyself to me, Lord. Reveal thyself to me. And I would do this, and I still do this, but back then, just be like 2 hours. Beloved God, reveal thyself to me. Reveal thyself to me. And it was such a beautiful, I felt like, thank God somebody gave me language
Hmm.
for what I'm trying to express to whatever it is out there. But it's like, please be with me. Like, let me be one with you. Again, this separation is like a torture, you know? And I just love that, Paramahamsa Yogananda came to bring the balance. And I feel almost like the Paramahamsa Yogananda part of his journey gives him the yin that was missing to his yang, because it was all very much doing and very zen and sitting and do the mantra. So it's very, but where's the emotion, right? Where's the soul? Where is that? And
Mm.
so I feel like this came and balanced him out, because clearly he still had the discipline from
Right.
the Zen Buddhism, but now he had the spirit, which he said he had never even used that word in his life, spirit,
Hmm.
until he saw it in the autobiography of a yogi. And suddenly he was like, yes, spirit, that's what it is.
Yes. And
So
he
I
also
love that
talks
part.
a little bit about Jesus,
Hmm.
and not really had being cottoned to Jesus or being like having an affinity with Jesus, but going on to read the New Testament and realizing, oh my gosh, so much of this, these red words in the Bible, these Jesus
Yes.
words, align with everything that I'm actually experiencing. So he's having gnosis, like his
Mhm.
meditation, while yes, very strict, was also just about what he was experiencing, that wordless, kind of ineffable space and experiencing that. And now we're going to bring in, like you say, the emotion and also the knowledge and just these
Mhm.
other beautiful
Agrees to it.
layers.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm super excited to see
I can't
how
wait.
he opens up
And
to
I
that.
did, do I have them in here? No, they're outside. So the lessons that he talks about, I have all of them
Oh,
because
you
I
do.
did the lessons from the from Paramahansa Yogananda's
Self-realization. Yeah.
Self-Realization Fellowship, and they send you these beautiful books with a picture of him, and then there's the exercises to do, but you have to sign like a whole agreement, like you're entering into a covenant with them that those are for you and you're not gonna do anything with them. That it's such a very
Really?
disciple, yeah, like a discipleship type of thing where you're really entering with reverence into this mystic knowledge, because kriya, it's like the quickest. I mean, honestly, the kriya yoga is it's the quickest burner away of karma that I've ever experienced, because what that breath does, when where it goes in the body, what it finds. Sometimes when I have a problem with someone or something, I imagine the person and then I do the kriyas. And then I just say, wherever this resistance or this sadness or this unforgiveness is living, let me breathe it. So I just hold the person in my mind while I'm doing the breathing. And can I just tell you, after a while, it's almost like you're empty. It's hard. You're like looking to find that
Hmm.
feeling, but you
Hmm.
can't because you've just literally breathed it out of you from all the hidden places. So
Where
I
can
think,
someone find a tutorial on
oh my goodness,
Kriyic breathing?
Kriya Yoga. So it's called Breath of Fire.
Hmm.
If you just go on YouTube, Breath of Fire, but I'll find some links,
Is it that
and I'll
one?
also, yeah, it's that one. You have the one Kabbalavati, also like the, but it's like really using the diaphragm.
Hmm.
And then there's some where you expel all the air out, and then you fluctuate your stomach, and you're really like getting all that dead,
Hmm.
stagnant energy out. There's a lot of different ways, but I'll give you the link for the self-realization fellowship
Hmm.
link for the lessons, and then we
Hmm.
can put it in the chat,
Okay.
in the comments, and that way whoever wants to, and we'll get some videos too for YouTube that
I,
people can
I don't know
do.
if I ever told you that I went to the Self Realization Fellowship in Southern
No.
California. Yeah, my friend ended up taking me there. It was
Oh, wow.
so high vibration.
Right?
Yes, the
Yeah.
entire and had I read Autobiography of a Yogi at that point? I don't think so. I think it was
Mm.
early aughts that I was there, but I just remember how absolutely magical
Hmm.
it felt there, and just stopping at the different points around the lake and just sitting and meditating. Oh my gosh, it was beautiful. Did you see recent documentary on Yogananda? It was,
Yes.
I saw that too. I
Very
went,
long documentary about
yeah.
India and how he
Hmm.
got started over there and came here. And
Yes.
just when you think about the time in history when he came, and the fact that he was even
Hmm.
able to be taken seriously or make a dent in a time when racism was so strong and no one that wasn't white was, taken seriously. And the fact, that's the power that this man had, the spiritual power, that it just, nobody even saw the outside anymore. They just felt the, and I had an experience with Yogananda, um, where I was meditating one day, and I said, please, please guide me, like guide me in my day to day life, guide me. And I was driving my car, and I saw like an image of him, like, but like outside the car, but not like complete, just like kind of a floating thing. And it was like, go right. So I was like in a 4-lane highway, and and I just moved through all the cars and I went right, because you don't tell him no.
Right.
When he comes, he has
Right.
the most intense eyes.
Hmm.
And later that day, I found out that straight there was the worst traffic accident, like 5 or 6 cars, whole bunch of dead people, like all
Oh
this stuff.
my
And
gosh.
that was minutes, like minutes before. So I was going to go straight and he was like, go right. And
Wow.
I just went through all of the things and made the right. Didn't know why. Totally the opposite direction. But again, surrendering, right?
Mhm. And trusting.
And
Yeah,
trusting.
surrendering and
Yep.
trusting. Amazing.
Yeah.
I've got
That
to
was
read
really,
Autobiography of a Yogi again.
it's so beautiful. It's
It's
a
been a
love
few
letter to
years.
God,
Yeah,
basically, you know?
it's wonderful. Well, I am so excited to see what happens in this story.
Yeah.
Again, this is really written in an entertaining way. It's not a
Hmm.
slog through the chapters. It's like I'm very interested to see what happens next. So, section 2 is called The Great Experiment Begins. And I will
Hmm.
say that the chapter titles are The Experiment of a Lifetime, Life Takes Charge, The Prince and the Pauper, Following the Invisible into the Unknown, My First Job Interview, Letting Go of the Rope, Acceptance, Acceptance, and More Acceptance, and the most important thing I was ever asked to do. We're going to be learning about all of that in the next section and
Hmm.
talking about all of that in our next podcast. I think this is good. This is the right time for
Yeah.
me to be reading this actually in my life,
Great.
Elenique.
I'm glad.
Yeah,
I'm
because
so glad.
you know why?
Tell
because
me, Crystal.
because
I just
I
want to
just
say.
I'm like so willing right now energetically
Hmm.
to do something different.
Hmm.
And it's not like so normally I'm a Taurus, okay?
Mm.
I don't want to change if I don't have to. I'm pretty comfortable where I'm at. I don't like I'm an immovable force, okay?
Mm.
I'm normally like that, but I just feel like I'm not ready for a reinvention, but I'm just in a space where I'm really looking for the highest excitement. And
Mhm.
I've got the maturation that you were talking about and I've got the eyes to see. And I understand my strategy, as a generator is to respond. So I got to be looking at what the field is showing me. And
Yeah.
so there's this supreme peace about being okay right where I am and not having to do anything right now. And
Mhm.
also this little bit of like excitement that, ooh, what interesting fun trip to Mexico with the banditos can I get myself into if I just allow myself to
Yes,
flow? And like I'm open to all of it right now.
totally. Yeah, I'm so excited to be doing it with you, to be reading this book and with everybody else. I definitely, like, as we know, when you do things in a group, it creates a certain kind of energy. So I'm sure we're all being elevated by co-sharing this experience. And to that end, that's why I made the recording.
Yes, you made a
That's gonna
meditation for us.
Yes, it's a very short 10-minute meditation to begin to practice what he did at the beginning of his journey, which is really to just begin to notice breath and the present moment as it is, and to just be comfortable watching ideas come, watching them go, and just becoming familiar with the silence within. So hopefully every week I'll be able to provide something that further supports so that we can kind of follow his journey. So for
Mm,
those of you that will be listening to this podcast, go ahead and check out. We're gonna have the B, right? Like we did that
yep.
time, A
We'll
and
have
B.
this episode and then a B, which will just be the meditation itself.
So practice it to the best of your ability every single day. And that way you'll experience the incremental shifts because just like Michael Singer, Mickey, we want to go ahead and go on this journey, really experience the journey, just not in the mind, but also in the body and in the experience of it. So I really encourage you to try to the best of your ability to do what you can, even if it's just while you're walking or cleaning, or doing the dishes or doing your laundry,
But
but you're
not
doing it,
driving. But
not
not
driving.
driving.
Please, not driving.
No.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're watching on YouTube, we're going to make a separate video for that meditation. So look for that as well. And again, if you're listening on audio, it'll be right there, the episode after this one. So, can you give us any ideas? Because I haven't read this book, you have. Can
Hmm.
you give us any ideas about what's coming up a little bit?
You wouldn't believe it if I told you.
Really?
Yes, because this man that seems just like a regular guy, who all he wants is to go in the woods, ends up becoming like a billionaire, and it becomes a major businessman and business force in the world. And then just when you think that was the end of it, then there's a whole other plot twist. So you couldn't write this story if you tried.
Is he still alive?
Yes.
Do you think he'd come on our podcast?
I don't know, but he lives in Ocala. He still lives there in
Oh,
the
he
woods.
does? He lives
Yes.
in this on the same 10
In the
acres?
same I think he bought continued to buy, so now he owns a lot more than the 10 acres. I think he kept
Mhm.
buying and buying. I think that's part of the story. He also has the book, The Untethered Soul, which is, a continuation of this journey that he
Mhm.
began.
Mhm.
But he has a beautiful church, multi-faith church on the property. You can go to services there. I believe it's on Sundays. It's my dream to go there one day,
Girl,
that's for
let's road
sure.
trip to do it. Let's do it.
Right?
That's
They'll be like,
Florida,
"Michael
right?
Singer, we love you." Yes, Florida.
Okay. That's not so far away from Texas. It is far away from Curacao.
A little bit further.
But you could get on a
But
plane.
yes,
Oh my
totally.
gosh, that would be so fun.
Yeah, that
All
would
right.
be. We need to do that.
I would love to do that. I mean, say no
Okay.
more. I really would do that with you. I
Okay.
mean, we're talking about maybe meeting in Miami. So if we're going to be in
Yes.
Florida anyway, we could just road trip.
Get in a car, girl.
That's right. I'm
We'll be
into it.
like, "Hello, it's us." It's miraculous thinking.
The podcast.
Mhm.
Well, this has been so much fun. I'm really enjoying this book. I hope you guys are enjoying it too. If you haven't gotten the book, I really think that you should. I know that we're kind of breaking it down a little bit, but there's so much more that you will get if you read the book. It is
Yes.
called The Surrender Experiment: My Journey into Life's Perfection by Michael A.
Mhm.
Singer. And we're going to be going over it for the rest of this month, January 2023, and also February 2023. Again, the books that we're going to be getting into after that in order will be Inside the
The
Body
body.
of God by Karen Curry Parker, who is Elenique's mentor.
Mhm.
Illusions by Richard Bach. And then
Martha
Martha Beck,
Beck.
The Way
That's
of
it. The Way
Integrity.
of Integrity.
So much good things coming down the pike for us on this podcast. I love learning. I love reading. I love talking about it.
And
Perfect.
talking about it with you. So there you go.
Well, thank you, everybody. And until next time, have a beautiful day or night, as the case may be. We will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye-bye.